Not all at once, no, first, the shadows, the things that flicker at the edge of your eye, calling you by names you don't remember choosing, the way the hallway bends differently when you walk alone, the silence between a question and its answer. You will see that too. You will see the face beneath the face, the smile that doesn't stretch far enough, the hands that shake after the applause ends. You will notice how light pretends to reveal, but only covers the truth in soft gold. You will see the river running backwards in your dreams, the clock that ticks in time with your doubts. You will see your own reflection blinking before you do. You will see how people forget, how they remember what they want. How memory is not a story, but a rehearsal, over and over and over, until you believe it was always like that. You will see what they meant when they said nothing is free. Even the sky asks you to look up. Even hope charges you interest. Even peace carries a warning label in small print. You will see the ghost in the mirror, not haunting, watching, waiting for you to ask the right question, one you're not ready to know the answer to. You will see the walls breathe. You will see time shiver when no one is looking. You will hear the click behind your thoughts, the mechanism, the hidden gears. You will see everything, but not until everything has seen you. Perception reveals hidden truths over time. At first glance, the world seems straightforward, filled with objects, people, and moments that simply are. We wake, we walk, we speak, we sleep. The world responds, but slowly, with time, those responses begin to shift. They stretch beyond the surface. You notice something different, not immediately, but gradually. What once looked like simplicity now becomes layered. The same hallway you walk every day begins to feel longer, narrower. The color of the sky at dusk starts to weigh more than it used to. The air in certain places hums differently. Perception doesn't reveal all at once, it peels, like paper from old walls, and under that paper, there is another pattern. Beneath that, another. Eventually, you stop believing in flat surfaces. Everything holds something else inside. This is not revelation like lightning. This is revelation like rust. It creeps. It stains slowly. It teaches you that the loudest truths are rarely the first to speak. At the beginning, you take everything at face value. A smile is a smile. A silence is a pause. But with time, you realize the smile is a shield, and the silence is a scream folded inward. You grow into the ability to see these things, not because you seek them, but because life demands it. You've watched people say, "I'm fine," with eyes filled with crumbling cities. You've heard laughter shaped like resignation. Over time, the shape of truth changes. It's no longer what is said. It's what tries to remain unsaid and fails. Perception sharpens not with effort, but with scars. You see clearly after the world has left its marks on you. When trust has been broken and reassembled, like porcelain, never quite whole again. When you've had to replay moments in your head at night, hunting for the sentence that changed everything. In that stillness, your vision deepens. You begin to see the mechanics of the moment, the turning gears behind simple words. You understand that sometimes the truth isn't in what someone says, but in what they avoid, in the pause, in the breath they don't take, in the hesitation before their answer. This is the language of truth. It speaks softly. You must learn to lean in. As you move through life, old truths collapse and new ones rise in their place. The certainties of youth, good and evil, black and white, always and never, fade into gradients. Perception evolves into a fluid instrument, no longer bound by the rigid definitions you were once handed. You start seeing connections that once seemed invisible. A stranger's sadness hidden in posture. A friend's fear woven into the tone of a joke. You no longer believe in coincidence the same way. You begin to recognize patterns. History repeating, not loudly, but in whispers. In how a father and son flinch the same way. In how loss wears the same shape on different faces. Perception, when matured by time, becomes a kind of listening, not to voices, but to presence. The way a room feels when someone enters it. The cold left behind when someone walks away. You can't measure these shifts. There's no device for it, but you feel it in your bones, in your breath. It is not something you learn like a fact. It is something you grow into like a second skin. There is a moment when perception ceases to be passive. It stops being about what your eyes deliver and becomes about what your mind constructs. You stop looking just to see. You start looking to understand. You watch someone pick at their sleeve during a conversation, and you know they are unraveling. You see someone clean obsessively and understand they are trying to impose order on chaos. It is not the act. It is the shadow behind the act that perception now focuses on. You learn to read between the lines, to interpret the blank spaces on a page. You stop fearing silence and begin to recognize it as one of the most honest languages there is. Over time, you realize that many things you once saw were edited by the limits of your understanding. You were watching a play and mistook it for reality. But now the curtains are drawn back. You see the lights, the stage, the prompts whispered offstage. You see how much of what you called truth was choreography, how many smiles were rehearsed, how many friendships were held together by the fragile glue of convenience or need. These things don't hurt you like they used to. Instead, they inform you. You see the necessity of masks, the kindness in pretending, the survival in lying, and perception expands further into compassion. You see not just what is hidden, but why it's hidden. You begin to forgive the deceptions of others, not because you approve of them, but because you understand them. You no longer demand full exposure. You realize that everyone carries something they are not ready to show, and maybe they never will be. Your perception softens, it grows deeper, but it does not become cruel. It becomes wide, vast enough to hold contradiction, ambiguity, grief, and joy in the same frame. There are moments when perception turns inward. You start seeing yourself as others might. You see your own fear in the way you deflect questions. You see your own longing in the things you laugh at. You recognize the little performances you do to maintain an identity that once fit, but now itches like a shirt grown too small. You catch your reflection in a window and realize it looks tired in a way sleep cannot fix. You see yourself aging not in skin, but in softness, in the ways you allow others to speak, even when they don't deserve the space, because you remember being unheard. That too is perception, shaped by wounds, tempered by time. With each year, perception fragments further, yet somehow it also refines. You see the world not as a static picture, but as a moving canvas. The man yelling on the street corner is no longer just a nuisance. He's someone whose pain has spilled outside the boundaries of silence. The child throwing a tantrum is no longer annoying. He is someone testing the limits of attention and love. You begin to see beyond behavior. You see causes, origins, histories, invisible weights. You understand that the truth of someone is rarely contained in their actions alone. The truth is the storm behind them. And still, there are moments when perception betrays you. When what you see is not what is, you learn that vision can be colored by fear, desire, or memory. That seeing clearly requires more than eyes. It requires stillness, honesty. Sometimes it requires detachment. You can look at something for years and see only what you wish to see, until one day the veil lifts and the truth stands bare, asking, were you ever really looking? Perception sharpens most in grief. When you lose something, everything else becomes more vivid. Colors deepen, sounds sting. You become aware of all the moments you missed before. You become attuned to absence. You notice the chair that remains empty, the phone that does not ring. You hear the echo of what used to be, and perception becomes memory made present. In loss, you develop eyes that see backwards. You replay conversations, seeking meaning in things that once felt trivial. You realize how much truth was scattered in casual words. In that hindsight, perception turns into a map of all the things you didn't know you were seeing. But perception is not only born of pain. Joy too transforms how you see. The day you fall in love, the world blooms differently. Faces seem kinder. Light feels warmer. You see potential in everything. When you experience wonder, true wonder, you realize how numb you had been before. You begin to perceive what others overlook. A flower growing from concrete, the rhythm of rain on glass, the silent choreography of birds in the sky. You understand that perception doesn't just uncover what's wrong. It illuminates what's beautiful, delicate, and easily missed. The slow unfurling of perception is what gives life depth. Without it, we skim along the surface, mistaking labels for essence, roles for identity. But with it, we begin to penetrate. We begin to see the hidden scaffolding of the world, the fears that build laws, the hopes that sustain families, the stories behind scars. Perception doesn't just change what you see, it changes how you carry what you see. You are no longer a passerby, you become a witness, and this witnessing never ends. It grows with you. What you perceive today may become outdated tomorrow. The lens shifts, the light bends. You revisit old memories and find new truths inside them. You realize perception is not just the act of seeing. It is the relationship between you and what is seen. And as you evolve, so too does the world before you. Reality is layered with illusion and memory. What you see is never just what is. It is a blend, a weave of what stands in front of you and what stands inside you. Two people can look at the same event and walk away with entirely different truths, not because one of them is lying, but because reality, what we call reality, is soaked in personal history. We do not simply perceive, we interpret. We bring our past, our biases, our fears, and our longings to every encounter. The present is never alone. It walks arm in arm with everything we've survived, loved, lost, misunderstood. Illusion is not something foreign to reality. It is built into its frame. We remember things not as they were, but as we felt them. The moment you first tasted betrayal, the air that day, the sound in the room, the exact look on someone's face, all of it may come back to you sharply, painfully, but memory reshapes itself with each return. What you recall today is not what you recalled 5 years ago. The event is the same, but the meaning changes. That is the quiet illusion of memory. It is not a photograph, it is a painting, reinterpreted every time your mind visits the gallery. Reality, then, is unstable, not broken, fluid, and this fluidity can be beautiful or terrifying, depending on what you hope to find in the moment. There is a common belief that truth is singular, that facts are fixed. But when you dig deeper, you realize that truth too wears costumes. The face someone shows in public is not the one they wear in solitude. The story someone tells about their past is not always the one they live. It is the one they can bear to speak aloud. Even your own history is layered with illusion. You remember being strong in a situation where, in truth, you were just numb. You recall moments of control that were built on suppression, not confidence. We mythologize ourselves just to survive. Memory then becomes a form of self-protection, a curated archive. This layering isn't dishonest, it is human. The mind protects what the heart cannot handle. It creates versions, Softer versions, stronger versions, versions with sharper edges when anger needs to rise. You carry around these edited versions, and they begin to affect how you see the present. You meet someone new, and already your memory is whispering, warning, comparing. You fall in love, and the shadow of old heartbreak tugs at your sleeve. You enter a room, and something about it feels familiar, but not because of what is there, but because of what it reminds you of. The illusion is in the echo, the memory it wakes. And sometimes, illusion is not the trickery of the mind, but the surface of social life. People speak in half-truths. They smile out of politeness, not joy. They agree to keep peace, not out of belief. Entire relationships can be built on illusion, shared routines, mutual need, or comfort masquerading as love, and no one may notice until the illusion breaks. A moment of clarity appears, accidental, maybe, like light hitting a hidden mirror, and then everything that felt stable starts to shimmer. The illusion lifts, and what's left is raw. But sometimes it is not emptiness you find beneath illusion. Sometimes it is a more painful truth, one you were never prepared to face. Reality, as you experience it, is constructed moment by moment, informed by sensory input, and layered with past associations. A smell reminds you of childhood. A tone of voice recalls an argument you've never resolved. These moments feel real. They are real, but they are also distorted. The room you're in doesn't contain your childhood, but your mind inserts it. The voice you hear isn't shouting now, but your body reacts like it did before. Trauma replays, love replays. It does not ask permission. It interrupts, and in doing so, it changes what reality feels like. What is present is shaped by what is no longer there. This is why you can feel lonely in a crowd, or feel crowded in solitude. The mind fills in gaps, colors the blank spaces. You meet someone new, and already you imagine how they might hurt you. You return to an old place and expect it to feel the same. And when it doesn't, you feel something has been stolen, but it hasn't. The place has not changed, you have. The illusion was that time stood still. But time moves, memory stays, and the dissonance between them. That's where the ache begins. Even dreams are built from this strange mix of illusion and memory. You dream of people who are gone, and in the dream they are as real as they ever were. You walk through impossible places with perfect logic. The sky bends, time folds. You wake up and it fades, but the emotions linger. You've cried from a dream. You've smiled at a memory that never really happened. Your mind made it up, and still it mattered. What does it mean, then, to say something is real? If it left a mark, if it shaped you, if it changed the way you moved through the world, is that not a form of truth? And in the daylight, illusions do not leave. They wear suits. They write policies. They smile from podiums. Illusion becomes narrative, and narrative becomes power. What people believe matters more than what actually happened. History is rewritten not with lies, but with emphasis, with omission. The parts that hurt are skipped. The parts that flatter are repeated. Nations do this. Families do this. You do this. It is easier to say, "It was fine," than to describe the crack in your voice when it wasn't. Easier to say, "We moved on," than to admit the wound still stings when touched. We live in curated realities. Even time is an illusion we participate in. Seconds are a construct. Days are stories we tell the sun's movements. The past lives on only through memory, the future only through imagination. The present is a sliver, barely stable, and yet we plan, we regret, we hope. We carry time like a suitcase of assumptions. We assign meaning to anniversaries, to clocks, to seasons, not because time is fixed, but because we need it to be. Without it, we float. But the reality is, time is perception, and perception is not consistent. A minute in fear lasts longer than an hour in joy. A month of grief stretches like a year. Illusion again, and so we begin to understand reality is not a hard surface. It's soft, spongy, filled with invisible currents. You walk through a day and think you're walking through a schedule, but you're walking through ghosts. The past follows. It clings to corners. You hear someone call your name, and for a second it's a voice from years ago. That's not just nostalgia. That's the layering. That's memory reaching into now, bending the present. The moment itself is real, but what it means to you is shaped by every version of yourself you've ever been. You become a storyteller even when you don't intend to be. When someone asks how your day was, you choose which parts to tell, which emotions to include, which details to omit. That story becomes someone else's version of your reality. And they build their thoughts on that. Multiply that by every person you know, every interaction you've had, and suddenly there are hundreds of versions of you, all living in different heads, some kinder, some colder, none complete. Illusion is not deception. It is necessity. There is no full version of truth, only slices, angles, shards. There is also the illusion of permanence. We believe the things we see will stay. We believe people will return. We believe jobs will last, love will hold, health will remain. But permanence is another layer, a comforting one. The truth is everything changes, and yet illusion comforts us enough to continue. It allows us to build, to plan, to trust. Without that illusion, we might freeze. And so, illusion is not always the enemy of reality. Sometimes it is the scaffolding that holds us together. The dream we know is a dream, but still choose to live inside. And then there is the most intimate illusion, the self. You believe in a stable you, a name, a voice, a list of preferences and habits. But that self shifts too. You've changed your mind. You've surprised yourself. You've acted against your values and then justified it later. You've felt like two people at war. So which one is real? Is it the calm version or the angry one? The one in love or the one withdrawing? You realize the self, like reality, is also layered. A mosaic of memory and impulse, and yet we continue to say I, as though it is a single unit. That is the final illusion. And in this dance of illusion and memory, we continue to move through the world, finding meaning where we can. Sometimes the illusion helps us heal. Sometimes it delays our growth. Sometimes it lets us hope. Sometimes it deceives us so deeply we must unravel years of stories to find what's true. But even then, the act of unraveling becomes part of the truth. Because the effort to see clearly, to strip away illusion, is also real. The confusion, the doubt, the questions, that is where truth begins to emerge, not in clarity, but in confrontation. Seeing everything comes with emotional cost. There is a weight that begins to settle, almost imperceptibly at first, when your vision expands beyond surface. When you begin to notice not just what is shown, but what is hidden. Not just the gesture, but the tension behind it. You start to see more than the scene, more than the choreography. You start to see the internal struggle people carry behind their roles, the fractured lines in voices, the barely visible tremors in hands. And once that begins, it cannot be undone. The veil does not return once lifted. The world doesn't go quiet once you've tuned your ear to the frequency of pain, longing, and unsaid truth. Every room becomes louder. Every silence becomes heavier. You no longer simply exist. You bear witness. The cost begins in small ways. You walk into a conversation and you sense the misalignment. Words spoken politely, but tension hanging like smoke. You notice the forced smiles, the eyes that don't quite match the words. You hear someone say, "I'm fine," but the pause before it makes the statement ring hollow. Others move on. They take things at face value. You can't, because you see the crack, And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You carry it, you carry them, and you begin to absorb more than just your own life. You absorb the echoes of other people's lives too. The emotional atmosphere thickens. You become a vessel that fills constantly. There's a burden in clarity, in watching people you care about lie to themselves, in seeing someone you love slowly disappear into habit, into avoidance, into roles that no longer fit them. You speak, but they can't hear you yet, and so you become quiet. You become the observer, the one who sees the path they're walking down before they know they're on it, the one who recognizes the pattern, the cycle, the eventual ache. It hurts to see it coming. It hurts more to know you can't stop it. You begin to feel time differently, not as linear, but as repetition. You don't just live moments, you anticipate their echoes. Seeing everything strips the comfort of illusion. You can no longer retreat into maybe it's nothing. You know it is something. You can no longer believe in neat endings, in clean truths. You've seen too many contradictions to trust simplicity. You watch someone hurt another while believing themselves kind. You see love twisted into control, honesty wrapped in manipulation, grief hiding behind anger. You understand that people are not one thing, and that understanding is beautiful, but it is also exhausting. Because complexity requires holding conflicting truths at once, and your heart is asked to stretch further than it was ever meant to. The world becomes louder, not in sound, but in meaning. Every interaction becomes a story unfolding in real time. Every gesture a sentence in an unspoken conversation. You begin to read faces like novels. You notice the subtle clenching of a jaw, the twitch in someone's eye when a certain word is said. You don't just see pain, you feel it in your body. Empathy becomes involuntary. Someone cries and your own chest tightens. Someone walks away pretending they're okay and your body absorbs the weight they refuse to carry. You carry it instead, not by choice, just by design. Because seeing deeply is also feeling deeply. And it doesn't come with an off switch. There is a strange loneliness in this kind of awareness. Because most people are not seeing what you see. They're living in simpler frames, safer edits. They react to what is visible. You react to what is hidden. And that means you often carry emotional truths that no one else has acknowledged yet. You grieve for things before they're gone. You mourn relationships still standing because you can feel the fractures before they've widened. You get angry not at what was done, but at what it revealed. You feel disappointed not because someone failed, but because you saw how they convinced themselves they didn't. You learn that understanding does not equal peace. Sometimes the more you understand someone, the more it hurts. You recognize why they lie, why they run, why they push you away, and it makes it harder to protect yourself. Compassion blurs boundaries, and when you see everything, you don't just see what people do. You see what shaped them, the father that left, the mother who criticized too much, the childhood silence, the shame, the buried dreams. You trace people's wounds even when they don't show them, and in doing so, you carry some of those wounds as if they were your own. It's easy to mistake clarity for cruelty. People think if you see clearly, you must be immune. But the opposite is true. Clarity brings tenderness. It breaks you open in quiet ways. You sit with someone laughing and feel the grief behind it. You celebrate with someone while feeling the fear buried under their hope. Joy becomes layered. Beauty becomes fleeting. You know how easily things can fall apart, how quickly something whole can crack. So you learn to appreciate the moment, not because you're at peace, but because you know the peace is borrowed. And that knowledge aches. There is a cost in always understanding. You see someone lash out, and you know it's not about you. It's about the rejection they experienced 5 years ago. You forgive them, but the wound still stings. You excuse their cruelty because you see their pain, but the bruise still forms, Seeing everything doesn't protect you from impact. It just makes you understand why the hit came, and sometimes that hurts more than the hit itself. Because understanding removes the comfort of villainy. You can't hate someone who's broken, but you still bleed. You try to explain this to people, but the words don't land. They think you're overthinking. They tell you to stop analyzing everything, but they don't feel what you feel. They don't wake up with the weight of 100 small truths pressing down on their chest. They don't remember a conversation from 3 months ago because of one sentence that didn't sit right. They don't live in echoes, you do, and so you begin to go quiet, not out of bitterness, but out of fatigue, out of the knowledge that not everyone wants to see what you see. Not everyone is ready to carry what you carry. And you can't make them, but the cost isn't always external. Sometimes it turns inward. You begin to see your own patterns, your own performances, the masks you wear to feel safe, the way you shrink in certain rooms, the way you soften your voice to keep peace. And it's painful, because now, not only do you see others clearly, you see yourself, without filters, without excuse. You notice your avoidance, your projections, your fears dressed as logic, and while that awareness can lead to growth, it also leads to guilt, because you can't unsee the ways you failed yourself. You become more cautious with your joy, more reverent with your peace, because you know how fragile they are. You understand that every calm moment is surrounded by what-ifs, that every celebration carries a shadow, and you still engage, you still love, but it's different. It's quieter, because part of you is always scanning the horizon, not out of paranoia, but preparation. Because when you see everything, you see the potential for loss in every gain, the price in every blessing, the end in every beginning, and that knowledge weighs on you. The emotional cost isn't just sadness, it's saturation. It's a kind of constant fullness that never empties. Your heart holds too much. Your mind processes too much. And yet you go on, not because it's easy, but because it's the only way to remain honest. You choose to see, even when it hurts, because blindness, once undone, is unbearable. You would rather ache in truth than rest in denial. You would rather carry too much than miss what matters. Sometimes you envy the ones who don't see deeply, the ones who laugh freely, who take people at their word, who move on quickly. You don't look down on them. You admire them, but you know that's not who you are. You were built to perceive, to feel, to notice, and with that gift comes burden. Not everyone can carry both, but you do, even when no one sees you doing it. Even when your empathy is mistaken for weakness. Even when your silence is misunderstood as indifference. You carry quietly, because that's what seeing everything requires. They will not believe you. Not at first. Not when you begin to speak what you see. Because when you see everything, you also speak differently. Your words begin to carry weight that doesn't always match the room. You speak about endings before they happen. You describe feelings others haven't named yet. You recognize shadows that people are still pretending aren't there. And when you voice them, it's not clarity they hear. It's confrontation. They feel exposed. And so they deflect. They say you're too intense, too sensitive, too dramatic. They laugh off your insight because accepting it would mean facing themselves. And that is something most people are not ready to do. So they will say it's in your head. They will tell you you're wrong, not because they know better, but because they're not ready to see what you've already seen. It is easier to dismiss you than to confront the quiet truths you carry. You say something is ending and they say it's just a phase. You say someone is slipping away and they say it's just stress. You say the love is fading and they say you're overreacting. Because if they believed you, they would have to feel what you're already feeling. And most people need time to catch up to truth. Most people need the illusion to fade slowly. You, on the other hand, already live in the aftermath before the ending begins. You will sound like prophecy, but not because you predict the future. Because you notice what's already begun. You see the signs others miss, the repetition of words, the shift in tone, the hesitation in movement. You hear the silence that comes before departure. You sense when someone is checking out emotionally, long before they leave physically. You recognize when energy changes, when the air gets heavier, when smiles become habitual instead of real, and when you speak on it, they look at you confused, because they don't feel it yet, but they will. And when they finally do, they will think it hit them suddenly. You'll know it didn't. You'll remember the moment you saw it start, the first flicker, the first fracture. They will argue with you not because you're wrong, but because you're early. That is the curse of seeing everything too soon. You arrive emotionally before others arrive logically. You grieve things while they're still celebrating. You prepare for endings while they're still holding on. You begin to step back while they're leaning in. And in the gap between what you know and what they're willing to accept, you are called names. Negative, cynical, cold. You're not. You're honest. You just learned not to be surprised anymore. You've been through enough patterns to know the shape of a collapse when you feel one coming. And they will need to see it themselves. No matter how much you care, no matter how softly you try to say it, they won't fully believe you until their own experience confirms your truth. That is what makes it hard, watching people walk into walls you warned them about, watching someone you love believe a lie because it's dressed like hope, seeing them invest in something you know will break them, and knowing that if you speak again, you'll only be pushed away. So you stay quiet, not because you've given up, because you've learned. You've learned that sometimes people need to lose their illusions themselves. That pain is often the only teacher they'll listen to, and later they'll come back, maybe in months, maybe in years, with quieter voices, with softer eyes. They'll say, you were right. Not with pride, but with fatigue. Not with admiration, but with apology. They'll tell you the things you already knew, the endings you already grieved, and they'll ask you how you saw it, how you knew, and you won't say it was magic. You won't say you have a gift, because it wasn't either of those things. It was just that you paid attention. You noticed what they were too hopeful, too scared, or too distracted to see. And in that attention, you carried a truth too heavy for the moment. But the silence in between, the time before they believe you, is lonely. You walk with knowledge no one wants. You hold warnings no one asks for. You exist in a reality that others avoid. And sometimes you wonder if you should stop seeing. Stop speaking. Stop pointing out the things people run from. You wonder if life would be easier if you played along, pretended not to see the holes, smiled and nodded when the room burned. But you can't. Because once you see, you can't unsee, and once you speak, even if they ignore you, the truth echoes. It stays, it plants something. Some part of them hears you, even if they fight you, even if they say you're wrong. Part of them stores your words, and when reality catches up, they remember. They hear your voice again, not as threat, but as comfort, as context. Your truth becomes a map in hindsight, and in time, your presence becomes less threatening. They stop defending their illusions. They begin to look at you not as a destroyer of dreams, but as someone who sees through fog, someone who warns before the storm, and in rare moments, they will come to you first. Not to fight, but to ask, what do you see? And that is when your loneliness breaks, when your vision becomes valued, not because you needed validation, but because you finally get to use your insight without being exiled. That moment is rare, but real, and it keeps you going. It reminds you that while truth is often unwelcome at first, it is needed eventually. And when the pain finally arrives, people don't want comfort wrapped in lies. They want someone who already saw it coming, who understands, who doesn't flinch. And that's when they come to you, not for sugarcoating, but for translation, for language, for grounding. But until then, you must walk through misunderstanding, through dismissal, through the sharp edges of being right too early, through being seen as a threat to peace instead of a steward of clarity. And that's hard, especially when your truth is rooted in care. You don't speak because you want to control. You speak because you care enough to notice, because you've felt the aftermath, because you've walked through your own ruins, and you don't want others to fall into silence when they could be waking up. But caring that much, seeing that much, it sets you apart. And not everyone is ready for that kind of proximity to truth. So you learn patience, not the passive kind, but the kind that holds space without needing to be heard. You become fluent in silence. You listen even when you know the speaker is wrong, not to correct, but to understand their delay. You hold your insight like a seed, waiting for the season when it can be planted. You stop needing to be right in the moment, and you start trusting that truth, like water, finds its level, always, even if it takes longer than you hoped, even if it travels through grief first. You trust that what you see will one day be seen. Maybe not by everyone, but by the ones who need it most. And when they see finally, they will not just remember your words. They will remember your posture, that you didn't push, that you didn't mock, that you didn't say, "I told you so," when everything broke, that you stayed or returned, or at the very least remained open, because vision is not just about sight. It's about how you hold what you see. If you use it to dominate, it becomes weapon. If you use it to control, it becomes manipulation. But if you use it with care, with humility, with gentleness, it becomes healing, it becomes guidance, and that kind of seeing, that kind of truth, is unforgettable. Until then, they will not believe you, they will deny, they will distance, they will deflect, but none of that makes you wrong. It just makes you early, and being early isn't failure, it's preparation. It's planting, it's carrying light into rooms still convinced they're not dark. And when the darkness becomes undeniable, that light, the one you carried before it was wanted, will become the thing they reach for. Not because you forced it on them, but because it was already there, waiting, quietly, faithfully, like truth always is.